Hello everyone. My name is Margot Buckles. I'm a WASBA volunteer, and I have Alan Woods here, and he's going to speak a little bit about the different kinds of beehives. Alan, if you just hold on a second, I should be able to find your PowerPoint and take care, and I'll download it and we'll get going. So Alan is the president of the Washington State Beekeepers. And he is also the proprietor, along with his wife, Beverly, who is often behind the scenes, but is an important person in all of this, of the Woods Bee Company. And if you'll just hold on 1 second, we'll get the slideshow up. And Alan, you can just tell me when to.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, just.
Well, while Margot is pulling up the slide, so this evening we're gonna talk about the evolution of the beehives. We're gonna start from the very first record until the most recent hive. And once we hit the recent hive, or when we start going through the hives that I'm talking about, then we can answer any type of questions that you guys might have.
Okay, do you see that?
Yep, there we go. So
Okay.
again, I just want to thank you guys for joining me on this journey as I walk you through the history of beekeeping technology and innovations and explore how humans have housed honeybees through time across civilizations, from ancient hieroglyphics of Egypt to the smart digital hives that we have today. All right, so the first recorded record of beehives that we have. If you can go to the second slide, Margot.
Maybe. Oh, there we go.
There we go. So the first record was found in about 3000 BC, right? It's an ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic, and this became a symbol of the Laura Egypt, which represented both the land and Pharaoh, right? So this was really important because the honeybee actually became a symbol of royalty. And around 15 BC, the symbol of the bee became incorporated into the royal title. The honeybee was considered sacred. It was used in religious ceremonies as often as offerings to God, and in mummification. The beeswax was used for mummification, to seal bolts, and cosmetics. All right, and then one fascinating thing, if you go to the next one, they found all these hieroglyphics, and you can see they had ships on here. You can't really see the full ones, but they have, this one was really fascinating to me because this one showed Egyptian pioneers, how they migrated beekeeping by floating hives on boats along the Nile. So as the flowering season would change, they would go from south to north, and they would follow the flow and maximize their honey production, right? So, and then the Egyptians, they were really smart beekeepers. They built their hives out of clay cylinders, and they stacked them on top of each other, and they would create their apiaries. So they had a very small entrance at one end for the honeybees to come in, and then in the back they had a cap. They had a cap where that they can unscrew it and remove the honey to maximize the honey production. So the Egyptians were really, really good beekeepers, and there's plenty of records to support this. Okay, next slide. However, the oldest beehive ever found is about 3,000 years old, and it is made of clay cylinders, and it was created in about 10th century BC in ancient Israel, right? The archaeologists, they found approximately 30 clay cylinders arranged in rows, forming what clearly was a commercial apiary operation. Um, and Researchers estimate that these apiaries could produce up to 1 ton of honey per year, demonstrating a large-scale honey production. If you can go to the next one, then we'll look at these hives. So each of these hives was approximately 80 centimeters long, 40 centimeters in diameter, crafted from unfired clay. The hives were stacked. If you look at the drawing, they were stacked 3 high. This arrangement provided maximum space efficiency, allowing the beekeepers access to each individual hive. So if you can see how the beekeepers in the drawings, how they have these stacked hives, it'll allow them to manipulate the bees and maximize, again, their honey production as well. These apiaries were also located near fields that provided bees with abundant nectar sources. Right, so these were the actual the oldest ones, and in fact, they found some that have honeycombs in. I'm pretty sure that bees were probably still using them prior to them. I mean, after they excavated them, they were sitting there. The bees would probably use them because they were quite effective during that time period. Can we go to the next slide? The next slide is probably my favorite, and these are the mud skips, right? And they were used because of their simple construction, right? The mud skips were created by coiling ropes, and then they would form clay or mud mixed with straw, depending on what they have, and they would make these dome shapes, right? And then they would let them dry in the sun, right? But these simple structures was positioned, they could be positioned horizontally, vertically, depending on the regional practices, what area they came from. And these mud skips were partially embedded in some walls of homes, or they would set them in apiaries and have a bunch of them so that uh, they wouldn't be so much exposed to the elements. They would just cover them up. But these were pretty elaborate devices. Um, the only downfall in these is in order to extract honey from these, they would have to destroy the skip. They'd have to break the mud apart and pull the honey out, and they would in doing so, they would actually cause a lot of colony destruction and death. But the beekeepers had to save some of the brood comb and honey to start a new colony, right? And this made it less This was a less sustainable approach, um, but it's what they had. And then later they moved to if you go to the next one, there you go. They moved to the straw skip, and this was dominated and all throughout Egypt during they call it the medieval times. Europe. I'm sorry, Europe during the Europe during the medieval times until the 19th century, and they represented an improvement over the mud version because they were lighter, um, more portable, and they could be reused. So you wouldn't have to actually destroy them. However, the same reason you would still have to, it would still cause a lot of destruction to the colony in order to harvest honey. So that became an issue of that time. However, the destructive practices while using the skips led to the development of the lynx hive. You go to the next one. Right, in 1851, which is, I can tell you, it was made in 1851. However, it is still the most commonly used hive in the U.S. today. Lorenzo Lorraine Langstriff, he was a clergyman, a teacher, and an apiarist, and he was also known as the father of the American beekeeping, and he created the Langstriff hive, again, that we have today. The purpose of this hive that was to improve colony efficient and manageability and health so that he wouldn't have to keep destroying the hives. His discovery led to the development of movable frames, facilitating easily management and inspection of bees without causing excessive disruption. This hive revolutionized the beekeeping industries by allowing beekeepers to harvest honey more efficiently, establishing commercial honey productions while maintaining healthier bees, healthier bee colonies. Also, Langstroth discovered what we call bee space, which is the 3/8 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, which is the space in which the bees do not fill wax or propolis, right? Unless the space is smaller than 3/8, they'll use propolis, and if it's larger than 3/8, they'll use wax comb. So this discovery has modernized beekeeping today as today's standard. Okay, next. And also, from the Langstroth hive comes the Langstroth long. And this is an expanded horizontal hive that is expanded horizontally rather than vertical. But it uses the standard frame. It uses the same frames. The ergonomical design eliminates heavy lifting for beekeepers with physical limitations. While requiring more horizontal space, these hives can be managed with less equipment because there are no additional supers, no queen excluders, or inner covers. It's just simply beekeeping operations, just strictly using the equipment that you have and what you see here. And it says that this single level design creates a more constant temperature throughout the hive. This can benefit bee health in extreme climates as bees expend less energy on temperature regulations compared to vertical stacked hives, because that's where you have the Langstroth hive that are stacked. They create what they call like the fire effect, where the heat rises to the top and then there's less heat at the bottom. But this one, it's more regulated, and it's even the same as the top bar hive. They're also regulated. So if we go to the next slide. Top bar hive. And this is as we recognize it today. It was created by Dr. Morris Smith and his colleague Gordon Townsend in 1971. They were out of Canada, and they developed this design in Kenya, and this is where it got its name, the Kenyan top bar hive. If you could see this top bar hive, it's made with a V angle, right? And they're very unique. They're made with a V angle, and the bottom has a screen bottom, as you can see in the middle, and the tops have no solid frames. They're just top bars, and the bees build on the top bars, and you add more frames as you go. The top bar hives can be built with basic woodworking skills with minimal material, making them accessible in regions where limited resources are. And this is why this is advantageous in places like Kenya and other places where they don't have a lot of resources to maintain bees. This is the Kenyan top bar hive. Oh, one other thing, the only difference, or I would say the downfall in the Kenyan top bar hive, is not a downfall for say in a negative sense, but as a beekeeper, if you're going to maintain one of these hives, you need to be very careful when inspecting the frames, not to tilt them back too far or one way or the other, because the frame where it attaches to the top bar can easily dislodge itself. So you need to be very careful when inspecting these frames. But like I said, it's not a downfall, it's just on the beekeeper. We need to make sure that we do due diligence to protect the frames. Next. Then we have the Lens hive, and this was created by a French beekeeper in the late 19th centuries. And this horizontal hive design consists of one rectangular box housing somewhere between 20 to 30 extra deep frames, and it's particularly popular in Europe, especially in France and Spain. Its distinctive characteristics is horizontally orientated, combined with unusual deep frames that provide more vertical space for the colony to maintain a compact cluster during the cold months. This design supports natural beekeeping behavior while optimizing honeybee productions with minimum management, making it ideal for remote locations or sideliner beekeepers. So this is the type of hive that if you have a bunch of hives in a remote location that you don't visit that often, you could use this hive to house your bees. But again, there's a lot of learning curves that comes with all of the hives, especially this one right here, the Warray hive, right? This was created in the early 20th century by a monk, um, Abbey Emilio Warray. And these hives feature identical stackable square boxes similar to the Langstroths, uh, but instead of having frames, they have top bar hives, um, like the top bar hives. So the difference in this design, though, is the bees build their comb from the top down rather than how we encourage the bees to build from bottom up. So that's the difference. And what makes this one really difficult is that you will need a device or some type of lift or, for good healthy beekeepers to lift the box up so you can put your new box under the bottom. So you can see in the middle one there's a design where it has a rope where it lifts it up. And on the very top is it's like a quilt box that they use to insulate it and keep circulation going through here. Um, Again, this is one of those hives that require some skills doing it. This is really not required for new beekeepers. So before you decide you want to keep this hive, I would recommend that you become very well at overwintering bees in a Langstroth hive. And then next, then we have the AZ hive, right? And this was created in Slovenia in the early 20th century. And I'm not going to even attempt the guy's name, right? But they have made a lot of improvements in this hive based on the way they used them in Slovenia um, during that time. But right now, this hive is used by 90% of the beekeepers in Sylvania. So it is very popular and it is slowly gaining popularity with US beekeepers. And that's because of its unique structure. You see, this hive is typically built or housed inside of a building with the opening facing out of the wall, and the hive bit is inside of the hive, which allows the beekeeper to maintain and to and to manage the bees during all different types of weather. But instead of having boxes that are stacked on top of each other, the AZ hive consists of a cabinet style design with frames vertically placed like books on a shelf, right? And then they're secured with a rear hinge door. This provides access to all the frames without having to disassemble the hive completely. Like when we have a Langstroth hive, you'll have to take the box off and you'll have to pull the frames. With this one, you don't. You just open the door, slide the frame out that you want, and you can put it back in. So it makes it less intrusive for the bees. And the frames are accessible from the rear again and not the top. That's the only difference. The front panels of these hives are often decorated with the traditional Slovenia artwork. So they just mimic that. I was looking at a couple of these online, and I thought it was really fascinating because they had these actually on a trailer, and you'd walk in the middle of the trailer and you'd have these hives on both sides. So in Slovenia, they just pull this trailer wherever they were going to pollinate or get honey, and they could just move it and bring it back. The downfall with this hive, or the only disadvantage I would see, is the cost. This is not a cheap alternative for beekeeping. It's expensive, and you can't really expand your hive once you meet your the number of hives that you can adequately place inside. You'd have to build a whole nother building. And let's go to the next one. Oh, all right then. The next one is the flow hive. I'm sure most beekeepers have seen this. I've gotten a lot of questions about this hive myself. Everyone asking me how well this hive works. And honestly, I tell them I don't know because I've never used one. The premise behind this hive is you can see the middle picture and you can see the thickness of the frames, and even the first one, it has what they call split vertical cells, which they normally have the cells together, and the bees will build the wax and they build the honey and everything, and then you put a key in and you turn the key and it's going to split the cells and the honey just runs out. So it just literally pours out. You've probably seen the commercials where the kid's standing in the back of the hive and just smiling and the honey's flowing in the jar. It doesn't happen like that in my house, but um, these hives they're pretty good. This hive was just developed in Australia by a father and son team. The Flow Hive launched in 2015 through a wildly successful crowdfund campaign that raised over $13 million. It represents one of the most significant innovations in honey harvesting technology in this century. Right? The system has made beekeeping more accessible to beginners by simplifying the honey harvesting process. However, critics note that while harvesting is easier, beekeeping still needs to be learned proper. The beekeepers still need to learn proper hive management and inspection techniques to maintain healthy colonies. So yeah, it has its pros and cons, but still, regardless, um, how long you've been keeping bees, you need to make sure that whether you're using this hive or any of the other ones that I mentioned, you're using proper beekeeping techniques in order to main sure that maintain healthy colonies. All right, let's go to the next one. We're almost done, and we can ask these questions. Then we have a series of what we call, we're moving into the modern insulation hives. And one of the first ones that came out was the Apamay, and this was developed in Turkey, right? And this hive features a double-walled HDPE plastic construction with insulation inside. These hives are designed to last 10 or more years, probably more, but it depends on the beekeeper, the environments that he's in, and how he or she's in, and how well they maintain and care for their equipment. This superior thermal regulation helps colonies survive extreme temperatures while requiring less energy for thermogenetics. The design includes, right, integral features like a bottom-mounted pollen trap, interest reducers, ventilation system. The plastic construction is also resistant to pests like wax moth or small hive beetles. And this is a little better than your wooden hive, because if you ever had wax moth or hive beetles, you'll see that they'll start eating inside of the wood. Okay, and so you can see some of the qualification of the hives on the bottom versus wood. It's the only great variance that I see is in the and maybe not so much in the winter survival rate, but the pest resistance. All right, next. And this is the final hive before we get to answer some questions. The final hive is the digital this is where we enter the digital beekeeping era. And this is the Hive IQ, and this is another insulated hive design. And this is also designed to last 10 or more years. This hive, however, continually monitor internal hive conditions. It can alert beekeepers to potential problems before they become critical. It has sensors that help identify when colonies need additional uh, insulation or ventilation. It has integrated scales that track the colony's weight over a period of time, which will give you insight on nectar flow or honey production. Uh, and also how much food the bees are actually consuming in the winter months without actually disrupting the colony or lifting them up or trying to wait, because the scales are integrated and built in. Entrances, counter track bees the entrance counter tracks bee movements in and out of the hives with acoustic sensors, monitors, and colony buzz frequencies, which can indicate swarming preparation, queen status, and colony stress. Right. So all of this data, is collected through a wireless system on a smartphone app. And this allows beekeepers to monitor multiple hives remotely. So, and it uses this algorithm that they're constantly developing. So this is one of the newer hives that's in the U.S. today. That's Hive IQ, and they are and I've actually seen a lot of these monitors actually working. So they are working hard on a large scale to make these monitors and these sensors available here in the US. And I would say within the next few months, you're going to start seeing or having the capabilities to um, obtain some of these technologies. But again, I would tell you, no matter how much technology you have, how many indications, warnings, bells or whistles you have, you still must perform proper beekeeping um, while using these hives or any others. So what I did was I just went through some of the basic hives, some of the processes, starting from the top all the way to the end. So what I want to do now is if anyone have any questions about any of the hives that we talked about, or even just what do you need to do to your hive to get ready for this upcoming bee season? Um, Now is the time to ask.
Sorry, I just unmuted myself. You have experience with the Hive IQ. At our apiary at West Plains Beekeeper, we have a Hive IQ, but we don't have all the sensors and things like that. That's something in addition to just the hive itself. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And so this year in our apiary, they have a technician. He's coming over and he's going to equip 40 of our hives with all of this technology. And we're going to have a big computer monitor inside of our store where people can come in and they can just look at each of the hives, and then we can walk out and they can go through them and see what's actually happening and how the monitors actually work. But they will be accessible this year, so they're pretty like I said, I haven't actually I've seen one of the sensors. I haven't seen the scales or the other ones that they have, but I've actually seen on a tablet. I've seen how they can get the information from the sensors and how they were monitoring like how fast the nectar was the bees were bringing in nectar, and then you can see in a week, it just dropped all the way down. And they say, yeah, we went and harvested these hives. So it helps them because they don't have to keep going to each location and physically checking each hive to see if it needs to be um, spin. They can just set alarms on their system, and it tells them what hives are ready to be spent. But yeah, this technology is coming, and that's why they call it the Hive IQ, because it definitely is a smart hive. And again, I would just reemphasize, Margot, that we definitely need to be careful not to let technology take away our basic beekeeping skills.
Yeah, that's for sure. Actually, I think that Ellen, if she's still on, has some experience with the flow hive because I think that Jack purchased one as part of the initial crowdfunding. Ellen, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Could you maybe comment a little bit on the flow hive? Because I know there was some interest from someone in our club about it.
Yeah, well, living over here in Eastern Washington and having variety of drought conditions, we're not a prime environment for the success of a flow hive. It needs a high output of nectar flow in order to bring in a lot. The bees really want to have a heavy flow coming in, and then they tend to use the hive easier, quicker. Jack and I tried it one season and really didn't have much luck getting the bees to pull out and store honey into the flow hive piece. They definitely used the other boxes, but they were not happy with the flow hive box. So we didn't use it the next years because we are sort of in a little bit of a drought situation over here. And the people on the west side of the state that do have these said that they use it only when the heavy blackberry flow is on.
Yeah, I'm thinking that maybe in Australia they have higher fructose in their nectar, so it doesn't crystallize quite so fast. I think that that might be an issue as well.
Yeah, and Margot, you're exactly right. You definitely need to examine the area that you're in to see if you can actually support any of these hives or what hives work well in your area. And in Australia, like you said, in the Hive IQ, they were telling me that they gain anywhere from 30 to 40% more honey than we do a year based on the amount of nectar flows that they have.
Yeah, I'm gonna, excuse me for just 1 minute. Make myself visible again.
The
We have
question,
a high-
Margot and Ellen, for a beginning beekeeper, as they're getting into beekeeping and they're starting to spend money to set up their apiary, what cautionary notes would you give them as far as picking a hive type or types?
I would tell them to make sure that they find a hive that they have a mentor who has experience or someone who has experience with. Don't just grab a hive that you've heard about, but yet no one can help you through the process. But I would also say that the Langstroth hive is probably the most basic hive, and probably one of the better hives to learn how to keep bees in. And once you can learn how the bees perform and keep bees in that hive, then I would say, maybe you can move on to a different hive later. But make sure you have a mentor or someone who is going to work with that hive. I have a guy I know a guy who has a laying hive, and he's always asking me questions. And then he has a mentor, but he's like, well, but she can't really get her bees through the winter. And I'm like, I can't, I mean, I can tell you about the bees, but I can't tell you about that hive because I don't have any experience with it. So I would say try to find someone who has a hive, that you want to use.
We do have a question from the audience. Someone says, I have a pollen trap for one of my hive IQs. What needs to be done with the pollen after collection to make it consumable?
Okay, first thing you need to do once you collect that pollen, put it in a jar, seal the jar, stick it in the freezer for 24 hours. Don't leave it there too much longer than that. Stick it in the freezer for 24 hours. Take it out, and then you can leave it in the refrigerator. You can leave it out. The very first year we collected pollen, man, my wife was so happy. We had so much pollen, and we had all these little jars full of pollen, and we had them sit next to our honey that we had from the previous year. And I'm telling you, about maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 days later, the pollen started moving. So there was
Oh.
like, yeah, larva or something that hatched inside and it started moving around. So they recommend that you like dust the pollen a little bit and put it in the freezer. So if there's anything larva or anything on it dies off and you don't have crawling pollen the next few days.
If you're interested too, in terms of pollen collection, we just listened to Priya Chakrabarti Basu from WSU yesterday, and she's looking for citizen scientists who will collect pollen so that she can determine the types of plants that bees are collecting in various places throughout Washington. So if that's something that interests you, if you want to put a comment in the chat, we can reach out to you and give you her information, and you can reach out to her and become one of her citizen scientists.
And she's trying to do it across the whole state. So it doesn't matter where you are. We could definitely, they could definitely use you, so that would be something that I think would be fascinating to know what type of pollen do you have in your area and what time of the year is it coming in.
In our apiary, we have used Langstroth longs, regular Langstroths, and we have a Hive IQ, and we have an Apame hive, and they all of the Langstroth related ones, including Hive IQ and the Apame hive, are worked pretty much the same. The things that I like about the Apame is that it's got those hooks on these sides, so it basically ratchets down, and so you don't have any gap between the boxes, which is something that sometimes is a issue with the Langstroth woodenware. It gets damaged, and you'll get a hole where wasps can get in, and sometimes I end up duct taping the two boxes together to keep the wasps out. I also, for the Hive IQ and the Apame, I really like the entrances and the entrance reducers that are part of the hive design, instead of having to use either a homemade or another kind of wooden hive reducer. The Hive IQ, because it's made mostly out of a styrofoam type material, is very easy to lift. So for me, as a relatively small woman, it's a little bit easier to manage.
And you made a key point when you were saying like the Apame has the little latches that latch down. And it's the same thing for the Hive IQ. You have the little tracks that it sit in. And I don't know, we really need to make sure that we tell people that when you have a Hive IQ, you need to keep it strapped and keep it tight, because what you're trying to do is create a CO2 inside of the hive. And when you keep it tight and air can't get in or out, it creates CO2 a lot better. And they're using the hive, they're currently going through the hive in Montana, and they're trying to see how the CO2 affects the mites. The mite kill or reduces the number of mites that you have in your hive. So they're saying it's important that you keep it ratchet down so that the hive maintains the CO2 level.
And I also am interested in those AZ hives because I like the fact that you don't have to lift the boxes or anything like that. But the problem is, one, the expense, and two, since you do it essentially in a shed, you can't really move them around once you locate that shed somewhere.
Yeah. They all have their pros and cons, and I would say just keeping bees, I don't care if you keep them in a cardboard box, it's fun. You just got to figure out what works well for you.
Yeah, I guess if you do nukes mostly, you could keep them in cardboard boxes. That wouldn't really be a problem.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have any more questions for Alan about the different kinds of hives? Or any other beekeeping issue? Okay, well, that then is gonna conclude Ask a Washington Beekeeper for this evening. Please join us again next month for Ask a Washington Beekeeper. It'll be the third Thursday of the month at 6:30 p.m. And if you give me just a second, I'll tell you what the who is going to be speaking. Next month, we have, Dr. Jenny Walk from Eastern Washington University, who does research on the bee microbiome, the different things, probiotics and other things that are in the bee gut. So we've been hearing a lot about bee nutrition lately, and this is related to that. So we hope that you'll join us then for Ask a Washington Beekeeper. Thank you so much, Alan, for giving us your time and that interesting talk about beehives. And thank you to everyone who showed up tonight. Have a nice evening.
And for everyone who's going to listen to it later.
And for everyone who's going to listen to it later. It will be available on our Facebook Live page here, and within a few weeks, within a few days, I'll have it on the WASBA YouTube channel. So thanks again, everyone.
See you
Good
later.
night.
Yeah, good night.